So you had a question about the paradox of relating.
Yeah, and the proposition that, or how about the vow, the bodhisattva vow, that a bodhisattva will work toward the enlightenment of all beings before themselves.
It's a theory. Yeah.
Can other beings exist?
For that to be valid, you have to know what others are and then what the self is, or what it isn't.
So what is and is not the self?
Well, self, in this case, at this stage of, let's say, ordinary consciousness, is recognized as what causes the suffering. Self is identification. So can you imagine if you had no capacity to identify with anybody, right? How free you might be. So it's not as easy as no self, no other. There's no concepts there. That's another stage of it. So there's no body to begin with, right? Your own existence is questioned. So what you may be referring to is the inevitable karmic predicament of being attached to people. Whether you call them based upon self-identification or other identification, the bonds are set up, perhaps at conception. You're born of other, let's say, or maybe the self of your mother. That's a predicament. Maybe bad news. Depends on the nature of that bondage. And what that identification means, what self then means. So it's not simple, very complicated. When you start out as believing, or you're trained to believe of the mother as mom, so you believe of her in that sense, it's mom. Mother is mom. And then you have to ask the kid, if you had an opportunity to say, well, what does mom mean to you? And we see that if the child could speak early enough, say it's all about suffering. Because mom gave me the vital body, and the vital body is a torture chamber of desires and needs and vital necessities and all kinds of stuff. Karma. And so your basic training and grasping and clinging comes from an early life experience. And so even with people who are in the theories of, let's say, spiritual practice, that in itself won't undo that bond. Death doesn't undo that bond, so how's anything else going to undo that bond? It's more a matter of understanding that bondage, or bonding, understanding attachment, understanding it. Like gravitationally, attachment. Who's not attached to the earth by way of gravitation? So it's understanding the attachment and what the purpose is of an understanding of attachment. So it's to detach is not always enlightenment. To detach may be also a form of bondage. When we look at it closely enough, may see it as a paradox. So who understands the attachments they have in such a way that they are not suffering?
What do we need to know about our attachments in order to understand them to that point?
Well, it's pain. But you know that. You know, he's looking for a quick enlightenment here. Yeah, it's pain. It's what the meaning of attachment is. It's pain, suffering. Ordinarily. You might be too attached to a habit. You might be too attached to a person or something about a person. You might be too attached to faces, body shapes, right? What you think is beautiful and worth being fixated on. So that's an individual perception and an individual experience. See? But what it amounts to, from the point of view of the Dharma, is maybe attachment to what it is. Subject-object attachment. And when you're sitting, are you supposed to be attached to anything? Good question. What do you think you're supposed to be doing when you're sitting relative to attachment? You're supposed to be attached to sitting? Attached to the results of sitting? Attached to the teachings on sitting? Some might say, and it could be true, that attachments are payments. Marriages are payments, not just fun houses of free self-indulgence and other indulgence, right, to the infinite. Some men would like to believe, some women might agree with that. It's a payment. Which implies then that you have a certain window of time to get a certain thing done, let's say. Something to accomplish. Maybe some knowledge to accomplish during that time. People generally do not think in those terms. They would rather go towards extreme self-indulgence ordinarily, if they can get away with it. So payment then is implying more deeply what was going on before. What does the person owe you, and what do you owe the person? Do you know? We have to push the veil aside. Say a friendship of ideal partners and all this glamour that's added to it has nothing to do with what it is. Ignorance. So you don't know what you're with somebody for. So, apart from your idea, maybe a need for self-indulgence. So, comment. And that's true in business partnering, bands, and so on. All forms of social interaction have these implications sort of looming above them. Who's who? Who owes who what? What are we doing here? Here, obviously, the arrangement is to hear speech that is supposed to shed light on karmic, say, machinations. And that means pointing certain things out so that you can think about it and maybe detach yourself from what you might be too attached to, or attach yourself to that which you might be too detached from.
So that seems to imply that the ideal state may not be in complete detachment. What do we need to be
It might
attached
be,
to?
it was already mentioned, understanding what it is. Not merely discussing the concept of what it is, but understanding what it is in the individual's case. How much time to be with your mother to keep it good, right, so to speak, to keep it going well. How much time to spend with your enemies to pay the debt, right? Go through the struggle, the conflict, the lawsuits, right? the gone sour love affair, whatever it is. Right? Bad news, bad karma. Right? Seeing through it is important. Not just looking at it. Not just being happy because you have attachments, you have the cronies, right? You have buddies. So you don't know what they're doing to you to hold you back or push you forward, exactly. Because you hang out with certain peeps, especially as musicians, and that's to bring you down, to keep you in bondage. It's not to elevate you particularly, or help you progress particularly. No, it's just attachment. Like the person, like the musician, like the way they play, like the way they hang, so to speak, hang out, like the way they live. And it's an attachment, no doubt. But is it for enlightenment, information, or just for bondage? Attachment for attachment's sake in the worst way, where you're put to sleep by it. You're not watching, you're not looking, you're not thinking, you're not seeing. You're not perceiving anything about it, so to speak. And this is true in romantic entanglements as well. Right. Silly, stupid, nonsense, emotions, addictions. People fall in love with one another for the strangest, weirdest, maybe amusing things. I like their car, I like the hairdo, I like the lipstick, I like the underarms, I like the hair on the body, and all of these like, huh? Okay, if you must. What? Well, we fell in love. I said, oh, what caused that, by the way? Oh, they look this way. They smell that way. Okay, good reasons, I take it. All right, everyone's, doing their thing. But who's seeing the attachment and maybe the karmic implications of it? Does that even matter? In terms of what's being created. See, what's being created when you're having your sex? Right. Who's creating what? Who's creating who? Who's minding the store in the future? Sex, it's a creative act, right? They say that, right? Love, let's call it making love. That's like making it more like ice cream, right? What's being created of it? What are you giving up, and what is the other person gaining, or what are they gaining and you are giving up in this configuration of exchange, which nobody knows anything about because it's veiled by pleasure, right? And resolved in many cases by orgasm, right? Which is like a mock death, right? Which means what to who? You ever tell your mate that you just die? You just died. You disappeared for a few seconds. Your eyes rolled up into your head, and you went out. Where'd you go? Like, out-of-body experience, perhaps. Why? What? Comment. Or it could be music, could be anything else. Who's measuring? Who cares? Right? Who dares to talk or think about it in that way? Beyond the veil of what it is. Like the romance with war. Who's looking at it? I mean, how many people have been in that want more of that? It's like doctors. Those who've had to operate on people mangled, let's say, in car wrecks. Who wants to see more of that? There's attachment, association, and a whole bunch of other stuff. we rarely think about as being significant or important to think in terms of. But we're here to create and be created, right, by everything around us, and maybe recreate whatever it is for the betterment, maybe to make things safer for people, make life more meaningful, more, let's say, mindful.
So how do we know? Or how do we pull back that veil that you mentioned?
Well, it's better to say you can't know. And then you can sweat trying to know. Or say, yeah, you can know. That's good. There's only so much you can know, obviously. But then there's much more that you can know, depending on what it is you need to know. Who you are, where you come from, and what it is that you don't know that you need to know more about. So if we're talking about sleeping mind, sleeping consciousness, right? Mopey-dopey, right? Someone is not interested in anything. They just want their soda popcorn, which is normal. It's honorable. No harm being done, right? But then there's knowing. There's knowing. Is there an end to knowing? Is there a limit to knowing? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what you're open to and what your purpose is, what your function is. Some people know too much. Many don't know enough. That's it. Some things you can't know about. Obviously. And you can question it for all your days. You're not going to know any more about it if you're unconscious. If you're not here already. You can know that. But what do you know of it? From it. Because we're talking about consciousness on, consciousness off. Consciousness in fear and consciousness in joy. Consciousness of pain, consciousness of needing to know, consciousness of knowing. Which is not up or down, it's not here or there, it's just awareness. It's not an answer, not a question. So it's the consciousness of being that the yogis seem to become very good at.
And that takes care of everything?
For them, you have to ask them. What else do you need to know? Then knowing's not something yourself does. See? So then you can enter a place where knowing is not what you do at all. But it happens. So your questions, which are all self-based, for the most part, and very usefully so, are not the highest questions. A higher question might be, well, what's the greatness of not knowing? So then we have to dismiss knowing altogether because we see it as now as a limitation and negative thing. You have to enter no knowing. You have a question about that? Which you probably know as much as anybody else does. Well, anyone. You know that you have to get to know knowing. See, but they don't explain it, right? They don't give you a list, right, of how you get to know knowing, because there's no real list to get to know knowing. Because we are already simultaneously in the state of no knowing and knowing. Now we have to know we are in the state of no knowing. And knowing at the same time, we have to know that. So not knowing, in this sense, is not equal to ignorance. There may be some things you better not know. Yeah. So what? How can you better not know something? And so the human mind is designed with filters, let's say. Safety measures. You can't really find yourself in the unconscious and be able to talk from that. See? It's not easy, because when you're unconscious, you're not here, so to speak. Right? When you're conscious, you're not unconscious, you're conscious. So we can be conscious of the unconscious, but can be unconsciously conscious. See? Consciously unconscious. So then that goes to another point, which is, are you more than a self? Are you more than one state or level of consciousness? And here we are talking about attachment initially, and we're talking about who's conscious or who's unconscious of what that means for themselves relative to other people. So you like the person's face, you like all the externals about the people, you don't know what's going on inside them. So you don't know if they're dangerous to you in good ways or bad ways. You don't know whether or not they are carrying or possessed of dark spirits. You can feel it, but you don't know. So I feel this, I feel that, I'm around this person, I get headaches. If I'm around this person, I feel great, I feel hungry. Feeling all these things that you pick up from others. Not because of attachment, because then of association. So just association is a problem. Let alone being attached to them for good reasons or bad reasons, depending on yourself. Question?
Does the sensitivity that you are describing that can help somebody protect themselves from nasty situations?
Sensitivity is useful, but you have to be suspicious. It's even better. Right? Not vulnerable, suspicious in a creative sense. I'm not saying being paranoid for nothing. Creatively paranoid. So you say, hey, wait, what am I? You need to probe for yourself. Before you jump in a car with strangers, right? Or before you're talked into letting a guy do target practice with you as the object. Right? And that sounds crazy and bizarre, but you are a target out there. Other people. You go to a bar, you're being spotted, you're being watched, right? You're being entertained and deceived, right? By somebody's, let's say, hidden agenda, male, female, or whatever, And there's perfume coming from both sides. You got the armpit, shaving cream stuff, and the woman's got all this other garbage on her hair, lips. Right, and you're supposed to be like somehow either put to rest by all of that stimulation. Lure, right? Lure. Why are they luring you, right, into their web? Come on now. We're human beings. We're not dodos, are we? Right? And so we have to be careful. You have to be suspicious in a smart way. So you mentioned sensitivity. No, we have to know better. So we have to probe. You have to question. You have to inquire. You have to sense it. You have to know what your strength is, whatever that might be as an individual, whether it's feeling, whether it's talking, to get something that you need to know from the other person. That tells you the truth of what it is you're feeling or need to know to determine for yourself whether it's safe to take another step with the person. Male, female, doll, babe, hunk, whatever you want to call them. See? So you don't know. You don't know. You may not have been born to know certain things until you make it your business to know. And this doesn't only say apply to the individual, this applies to where you live. And if you're hearing what's going on around you, upstairs, downstairs, around side, and all the rest of that. Perception. So you can say to yourself, I want to know what's going on around me. I want to know if I'm going to the great bar. I want to know who, tell me, you say to yourself, tell me who is not good for me. Say, let me know where there's danger. You can tell yourself to do that. And depending on your relationship to whatever your self is, right? We're talking about your self-consciousness engaging and communicating with the inner consciousness, which may know more than you imagine. If you're nice to it. But if you ignore it and starve it, it may tell you something else. You'll be knocking and knocking. No response. Right. Because you close the door, because you don't believe. So if you doubt your own ability to know, that's on you. Mm-hmm. An individual can have bad tastes, bad judgment, bad preferences. So part of the blood, karma, and the debt, making mistakes until you wake up. It's not bad. It's a learning process. Choosing for some people they say it's the wrong friends. So some people can see what you do before you do. See? Because you're involved in an egoic level, which means a blind level. You don't want to see it. You just want to indulge and trip, right? Egoically speaking, and engage their BS. And you're all sucked into, line, hook, and sinker in their BS. It impresses you. It's better BS than your own front, right? Your act, their act, their theater, their drama. Well, you have to see through all of that. So when you come to a situation like this where you have an opportunity to ask questions because you feel you're open and ready to understand what the purpose is of this kind of burn or purification, clearing the field for yourself, so to speak. It's there to be cleared. Clear. So you can walk forward. Not just keep going around in everybody else's circles. Walk forward if you sense, like now you're here, I say walk forward. Get away from all this circular, carouselic kind of behavior that you engage in relative to the nonsense of other peeps. Make your associations purposeful. Upgrade your preferences so that they are the right preferences, good preferences, like cars. You prefer a Tesla, of course. Who wouldn't if you know anything about Tesla? Who wouldn't? You hope it's like the magical car that'll get you across the galaxy and while we're pressing a button. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Comment.
Yeah. And up to a certain point, working with preferences, realizing that there are preferences.
Well, you can create preferences. You can upgrade your preferences. I say, I used to prefer that soda. Right. And those burgers. Now I prefer the veggie burgers. They don't taste as good. But we agree they're supposed to be better for you, lighter for you, less karma. Killed creature stuff is the heaviest food. It's the barbarian's preference. Comment. So we're talking about upgrading. We need to know enough to upgrade. We need to know that we can upgrade. That's part of the learning process. Part of tapping into the brain and the conscious intelligence that's there that has cosmic potential. No, we won't use that. Comment, please.
The karma that we show up in and we show up with.
Or the karma you're coming from.
Mhm.
Yeah, what about it?
Yeah.
Do you know the karma you're coming from that leads you to all these dubious places and situations and people for the sake of what? Social interaction? Could be the best thing to do. Could be the worst thing to do. Do you have something in you that tells you which it is for sure? So when we open consciousness, and we know we have this, so I guess you might say, level of integration, you're not going to be concerned about anything. You're going to know exactly what's happening. People don't believe that. That comes with practice. No questions. I mean, how can you be without questions? No doubts in a typical way, ordinary way. I have that, is it? And it should be here too. No doubt. Boom. You're coming from the place of no doubt. In other words, you're, in a way, not egocentrically centered, but you're heart-centered. Big difference. People say along with that, "Oh, Spirit, please help me to know the way. Say, guide me straight through all this." Yeah.